SciComm Studio. We're really excited to have you all join us today as we launch this new initiative by Research and Innovation BITS Pilani, one that's all about bringing research and out of the papers and into conversations that everyone can engage with. Today's session is a part of the ANRF Outreach initiative and kicks off our colloquium series with a topic that's already shaping classrooms and discussion worldwide: how ChatGPT is influencing the way students write, learn, and think. And to guide us through this, we have Professor Santosh Mahapatra from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at BITS Pilani, Hyderabad Campus. His work sits at the intersection of digital learning and assessment, and he has collaborated with leading global organizations like the British Council and ETS. He also serves on the editorial board of Teaching in Higher Education. What makes today's talk especially exciting is that it's based on his highly cited research, offering real insights in how AI can be meaningfully integrated into academic settings, especially for ESL learners. So, without further delay, let's dive right in. Professor Mahapatra, over to you.
Thank you.
It will.
Okay, I can start. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm assuming that some of you may not be familiar with some of the terms used here, or for example, ESL. It's English as second language, and it means that people who use English as their second language, like most Indians, even Americans, quite a few Americans do that. And in some other context, people use it as a foreign language. There is controversy regarding whom you can call ESL, whom you can call EFL. But the basic difference is that quite a few people agree that ESL means where you have English in your regular environment, where you can go out and use English outside the classroom. In EFL, generally outside there is some other language generally used, and English is not really used outside. So that's the basic difference between ESL and EFL. Here I'm going to talk about ESL because in India we consider English as a second language. And I'll be talking about people who are in higher education. These are undergraduate students, and the impact of ChatGPT on their academic writing skills. This was published in 2024. The research was conducted in the first part of 2023, which was immediately after ChatGPT came to existence. And ChatGPT was released in November 2022. So what you have, what we have today is the study I conducted back then. So a lot of things that I mentioned in the study may not be, you can always ask questions or argue against those claims. So let's look at what I have to talk about here. You can, if you have any questions or queries or anything like that, you can mention in the, comment section. After the presentation gets over, I'll go back to the YouTube comment section and check if you have mentioned any questions. I'll try to respond to those. So let's go. So here is my plan. First, I'll briefly present the study, and then I'll talk about how you can operationalize some of the findings. And lastly, I'll talk about the scope for further research and collaboration, what you can do. Maybe you are not from applied linguistics or English language teaching. Maybe you are from some other discipline. But I'll keep it slightly broad because it's kind of targeted. My presentation targets not only people who work in applied linguistics or English language teaching or English language education, but also people who are in science and technology, like my colleagues here at BITS Pilani, all 4 campuses. So let me start my presentation. So the first thing that led to this study was the problem with the formative feedback, because we teach, most teachers in higher education, they teach large classrooms. Unless you are in a program and you have very small classroom where you can deal with students, at an individual level. Here, it's very difficult. And because you have a class of, let's say, 60 students or 70 students, it's very difficult to give them feedback. By formative assessment, let me talk about formative assessment first and then talk about feedback. Formative assessment has to do with when you integrate assessment with your teaching. They may not be necessary, and theoretically, they are not really graded, but in many cases, they are. But generally, you use things like, let's say, short summary, 1 minute summary, or 30 seconds, or 10 second, or 20-second summaries, or quizzes, or let's say, a group presentation, short presentation of 1 minute, something like that. You can do in many forms. You can do a quiz, you can do a lot of things with as part of formative assessment. The main thing is that formative assessment makes sure that students are engaged with what you are teaching. Second thing, you are also keeping track of what they are able to learn and where they are struggling. Third thing is, you also identify the areas where they need more support, and then you change your teaching, you change your materials, you change your evaluation, you change according to the feedback or the information you receive from formative assessment. So when you conduct formative assessment, you don't conduct it for the sake of it, you conduct it because you want to get information that can make your teaching better and that can make your students' learning more effective. And if you keep those things in mind, assessment becomes, very kind of a, ideally, it should be integrated with teaching, and it becomes much, I mean, it helps our learners, our students learn better. But because most teachers do not have explicit teaching in assessment, generally we do what we learn from our teachers. And generally these are assumptions, okay? Or these are what you see, you do, you just follow. Very few people go back, read on assessment, read on, empirically proved techniques about assessment, and how formative assessment can be carried out in the classroom, different modern techniques that have been proved to be very effective, useful, and for different disciplines, different subject areas. For example, what works in my classroom, like my classroom is a, like, usually something like, let's say, um, computer mediated communication or effective public speaking. These are kind of courses I teach. That kind of assessment may not really work in, for example, in a physics classroom. It has to be slightly different. So somebody who is working in physics must learn how formative assessment works in a physics classroom. You have plenty of research available, but sadly, we don't have an education department here on campus, or we don't have people who specialize in assessment. People kind of, they're not explicitly trained in assessment, they don't research assessment, they don't publish on assessment. So assessment remains a very, in India, it's a kind of very under researched area, I would say. And in science education, it's all the more problematic. So yeah, let's then, so to address that kind of crisis, because I teach large classes here at BITS, I thought probably I can do something, and I was not really willing to get into this because I was skeptical about, ChatGPT, and ChatGPT stealing my data, because it was 22 now December, when my friend uh, Svetlana, who is a co-author in some of my papers, she's a professor in the US, and she asked me, why don't you check this out? This is really cool, and it helps you do things really effectively. And you can think of using it in your classroom with your students. I thought maybe that's something that's nice, but I sat on the whole thing for a month and then came up with this idea, and then thought about if I can, and designed a study, and then went on to explore this. The requirement was to improve writing through self-reflection and continuous revision, which is kind of, these are two things which are very, I mean, core principles of formative assessment. Then crowded classrooms, you can't give individualized feedback. I mean, if somebody needs feedback with their writing, somebody needs with that, let's say somebody needs with organization, somebody else needs with, let's say, grammar. How do I do all that? Look, I mean, for all 60 people, it's very difficult. And then something that students need for real time, if they're struggling there with vocabulary or grammar, or let's say with a topic sentence in a paragraph when they're writing a paragraph, or when they're writing an essay with thesis statement, how do they address those issues instantly? I can't do that for all 60 or 70 people in the classroom. So for that, they came up. I mean, I thought probably I can teach them how to use ChatGPT. They were familiar with ChatGPT, not really familiar, but they knew that there's something called ChatGPT that was there. They were not using it for improving their writing or anything like that back then. And but yeah, they had access to mobile phones, computers, and other things, which made my life easier in my classroom, which may not be the case in other classrooms. So so I trained them. I took two ideas and put them together. Theoretically, I came up with this. So first one is dialogic feedback, which came through like when you ask something and it gives you, and then you ask for an explanation. For example, you say that, is my topic sentence all right? And then it tells you, can you comment on my topic sentence for a paragraph? Okay. And it tells you, yeah, it's okay. And if this part is good, this is not good. Then you ask the second question. Do you think the main ideas and the topic, both parts are clear? You can give an example from your textbook and say that, can you verify in light of these principles? And then so the continual, interaction with ChatGPT, that was beneficial. So theoretically, it comes from Carles and somebody else, I think, 2011. There is a theory. And then reliability of AI, it comes because of the immediate, tailored, and need-based support that you get from AI. But I thought reliability doesn't mean that it's absolutely reliable. To some extent, it's reliable. Back then, it was not so much. Right now, it's much better. But somehow reliable, it's much better than you struggling and not finding any answer to your question. There's somebody who can help you. The teacher is always there, but you can always verify with the first source and then go back to the teacher. That's something I thought might work. So my hypothesis was uh, using ChatGPT for because I for formative assessment I use self-assessment and peer assessment. Self means I do my own assessment against a set of rubrics, a second set of checklists. Peer assessment same against a set of rubrics and checklist, and I use them. I taught my students how to use these things as part of my training with training in ChatGPT. I taught them how to use ChatGPT for self-assessment and peer assessment, and I assumed that it might help them improve their academic writing skills, which I was teaching. So I had these students who were science and engineering students, aged 18 to 19, and they were around. They were kind of proficient, more or less proficient learners, and a lot of people came in, but finally I had 35 in the experimental group and 37 in the comparison group because I divided two intact classes. And the intervention, 6 hours of intervention only, not much, because I taught these three components, which are one is compare contrast, comparison writing, one was cause effect writing, one was process writing. So then the first line, when we started the study, the first part was it was a mixed methods. I'll tell you why I use mixed methods. When you do a statistical analysis and find, this becomes one part of the thing, but it doesn't really capture what students think, feel about what happened in the classroom. Uh, um, they don't have a space to talk about their experience if you take only statistical details. So I thought probably some qualitative information regarding the experience in the classroom of using ChatGPT might help them. So what I did was I used some qualitative data which I collected through focus group discussions with students, and that helped me bring together the statistical findings from quantitative findings and qualitative findings. I brought them together, and I arrived at the findings that I did. So first, I had a pre-test. Then I did some AI training to the control group, the experimental group, and then the control group didn't have training there. But I used peer and self-assessment in both groups. Same task I used in both groups. Only except the use of ChatGPT, everything else was same for both groups. Same amount of time was taken, same time was devoted, and only difference was the use of ChatGPT in the experimental group. There was a post test that happened after the intervention was over, and then a delayed post test which happened 2 months later. Okay. And the focus group discussion also happened once again to capture the kind of reflect them. Those students, they reflected on the whole process and their experience and talked about it. So that's how I collected data for the study. And these were the kind of questions they were given. They asked. I mean, they were asked and they wrote. I mean, responded to these. If you look at these are very basic science and engineering. Students can easily respond to these questions. And before I asked them, I also asked them whether they have an idea about these, because my focus was on writing, but in science and engineering context, because that's how it works really well. If you give them, help them use language in the in an authentic context, which I used here. So these examples are from science and engineering. All these writing, the prompts are from science and engineering, so it's easy to do. Just that if you look at the last one, where the describing the impact of regular exercise on our mental health, it's slightly different, but mostly people can write all these things. And this, all of them, they agreed that they are familiar with these topics and there is nothing to worry. I mean, like, they didn't have to struggle with information for that is required to write these paragraphs. So these are only 150 word paragraphs, all of them they wrote, and for these three categories. So when I did this, I must mention that two people scored these responses to these questions. I scored the responses. Somebody else also scored the responses, and we kind of calculated whether the agreement of between us was appropriate to calculate that. We use Cohen's kappa, which is kind of a statistical method to or both scorers agree with each other to a great extent. So for this, it was plus 0.8, more than 0.8, so which suggested it was acceptable. It was good, it was acceptable. So Cohen's kappa was 0.8, and then if you look at the graph here, I'm talking about. I have used different kinds of statistical procedures. You can look at the paper and see the details. I'm not going to talk about the statistical tests that I have run in the study in detail. But if you see the basic descriptive statistics that I have presented here, it's kind of there is a difference in how the control group performed and how the experimental group performed. Even after the delayed post test, there was a gap. And I analyzed that. Sorry. Okay. Is it okay? Okay. Now I'm talking about here the test that I'm talking about here that tells you that the pre-test and the difference between pre-test, post-test, and pre-test delayed post-test and the post-test delayed. This is after the ANOVA was run to ensure that to see how the what this called the multiple t-tests, because they sometimes create problems. That's why you run a post hoc test. And I used Bunferoni, which is considered to be appropriate in applied linguistics. So I ran those and that test, and then I saw that there is a significant difference in how people performed in across these three tests. So that establishes the effectiveness of, statistically at least, it establishes the effectiveness of ChatGPT as a formative assessment tool, as a support tool in writing classrooms. And go and these are t-test results for post-test and delayed post-test between the control group and experimental group. There also you can see the differences are significant. So that's what I have mentioned here in those two. You can see the details in the paper, which is open access, and you can easily download and look at the paper. Now, for the qualitative analysis, I did a content analysis for this. I coded the data and found these codes, and I kept them under themes and sub themes. So the first theme was content, and under that you have two sub themes, positive and negative. So for positive, you see that the highest one is generation of more ideas on the topic, and then second one was focused information on the topic. Third one, promotion of learner autonomy. Fourth one, promotion of collaboration. So accordingly, you see that. And negative was less motivation to think and more machine dependence, which also are the negative impacts of ChatGPT. You become less motivated to think. That has been that I assumed back then. I mean, I found back then, but now you have a lot of evidence to suggest that it may lead to cognitive laziness if not used appropriately. If you're not familiar with how to use this as a teacher or as a user, if you're not familiar, if you don't know how to use it properly, probably you will land in trouble, or your students will land in trouble if you're not really training yourself. The next part was organization, where positive and specific and negative both types. Positive was it was easy to stay focused and strong connection between main idea and supporting details. So it when they used ChatGPT, they were able to adhere to their topic sentence and the supporting details. When they wrote, it was properly organized, and even use of signposts, which is also there, and the conclusion. If you see, the conclusions are properly written. So, but in negative, it imposed a pattern on writing. What is appropriate? How to use? What should go first? What should go second? And then that creative organization that we talk about, and especially in humanities and social sciences, especially in humanities, not so much in social sciences, that thing was not really there. But sometimes you may want to, but in science, I doubt if we need too much of creative organization as such. And in terms of grammar, we also saw that there is accuracy improved. That means grammatically they wrote more grammatically correct sentences because of ChatGPT, and then it became a reliable source of grammar because after correction you can always ask why did you do this, and ChatGPT explains to you very clearly. I recommend changing this because it explains the rules. That makes you feel confident about why you should use ChatGPT for correcting your language errors. And for negative, it kind of certain kind of, you don't pay attention to grammatical accuracy because there is something else, there is a machine that will correct you. So you don't really pay attention to your grammatical accuracy when you are writing. Perhaps you are more attentive when you were writing earlier. Right now, you are less attentive. Also, it imposes a pattern, which recently I have discovered, and probably I'll be publishing something on that. It imposes a pattern on your writing, which means the institution students success rate. Nobody writes institution students. People write the students of the institution. But after ChatGPT came or Grammarly came, you started using institutions and apostrophe, which becomes slightly problematic, I think, because it imposes a pattern, and also it forces you to use things like M dash, which is M dash, and also Oxford commas, which means before and you put a comma and right now in a lot of cases, which was not there when you were writing. But suddenly ChatGPT has done this. Earlier, it used to be highly sexist and misogynistic, but right now that has reduced a lot, and it may have some racial bias and some Anglophone centric bias, Eurocentric bias, but people are using all over the world, and especially in South Asia and Asian subcontinent and Indian subcontinent. So probably it will behave better in the future. So what I found was, if you look at some of the quotes here, I quoted first related to idea generation. The best part, you ask for information, you get it. this reduced our thinking time invested to get ideas. But the negative side of it is that because it reduced your time, your exercise, when you start thinking, and the cognitive exercise that you get, that also got reduced, which is again a negative side of ChatGPT. But if you learn how to use it, and if you're trained how to use this, probably you will do it. And then organization, I'm talking about structural focus here. This one of the students mentioned that you share the topic sentence and it tells you if and how you have adhered to the controlling idea. Let's say you deviate from the first, after topic sentence, you deviate, you start writing something else. It tells you that this is not really supporting what you mentioned in the beginning. That means your main idea. So you stay focused because of ChatGPT. That helps you a lot. So on your own, you may not be able to do that, and that's what the student mentions here. The last one is grammatical accuracy. So we are talking about good, attentive alternative to Grammarly. We kind of get sucked into curiosity by asking questions on sentence structure. Sometimes you ask, "Can I? Is this sentence structure correct?" And if it says no, then you ask them why. So you have an interaction there. You learn, some kind of explicit knowledge of grammar. Kind of develops it. You develop your explicit understanding of grammar, which is not a bad thing. It's good. So capabilities, the pros are you complete your task really fast when it comes to writing. You collaborate with your peers and brainstorm together, and you maintain focus on structurally. You maintain focus, so you don't deviate from that, and you don't do something that is not kind of fitting into the paragraph or the essay you are writing. Something kind of digressing from the topic, that doesn't happen because it helps you stay focused. And then next one is explicit metalinguistic explanation that I'm talking about earlier. When you ask it why it did it, why it wrote like something, and then it explains to you what kind of grammatical rule applies here and how it's different. For the emerging concerns, machine dependence, fear of losing motivation was there back then. Right now, it has been proved. Imposed patterns, it forces you to write in a certain way, which becomes slightly, very reminds me of colonial hangover. The third one is attention deficit. So you become potentially lazy because you because it does your editing, it helps you with editing. You don't pay attention to the details. So some kind of attention deficit also sets in. Now, when you draft something, you write. Let's say at first we take a bowl of bowl full of water and heat it, and it tells you that in a formal context, in scientific writing, you use passive. So then you ask, why did you change my sentence to passive? Then it tells you that it explains that passive voice and past sentence are required in scientific methods sections for objectivity. That's common across a lot of disciplines. So you use passive voice and past tense because this is how people write in science and engineering. Most disciplines, when they write the methods of data collection, or how they do how they do analysis, all that they write in past tense, and was done, was moved, and use passive voice. So students learns that zero conditional rule applying independently on future delayed post test. So when you say that zero conditional, I'm talking about zero conditional has to do with, and generally they are used in sciences. For example, if you say that when you heat a piece of iron, it expands. So heat is simple present, and it expands is again simple present. But generally, when you go to first conditional, if you come today, I'll meet you. If it rains today, I will meet you in the evening. If it rains is again simple present, but the second part is simple future. But in scientific cases, it's always simple present is followed by simple present. Whereas in normal writing in conversations, we use simple present is followed by simple future in a conditional situation. Conditional writing, I'm talking about sentence structure. So you have part one and part two. Part one is in a normal conversation, simple present followed by simple future. I'll meet you in the evening. But in scientific context, if you heat a piece of iron, it expands, again simple present. So which is explained to you by ChatGPT, which may not happen. You may come across it, or teacher may have to tell you, but it's easy for you to learn. So teacher's role also becomes very different here. You become a more from a micro facilitator means correcting all 100 papers and telling them what to do and all. Instead of doing that, you become a facilitator in the sense that you stay there, help them monitor, use ChatGPT and improve their writing, and tell them how to use proper prompts, what to ask, and how many prompts are allowed in a session. If you do that, then it becomes much easier. And you can promote self evaluation, you can promote peer evaluation, and this is a healthy culture, and this works for you, and the student becomes more empowered, more autonomous. They can do things on their own. They may not have to really depend on you for everything, but you can be there to help them, keep the thinking going and not stop thinking and not become cognitively lazy. Now, step one was prerequisite. So three things you are required to do if you want to use it in any other context. First, you need to do some prerequisite student training. Then you teach them how to create prompts for dialogue and not for output. And the third one, how kind of in the process, how you redesign your own role. For example, earlier you are going everywhere and correcting papers and checking things. For us now, you can do it in a different way. You can tell them what to ask and how to do this, but not take the content and claim the content as their own. Now, the obsolete model, which is that you were kind of you are facing like hundreds of students and their papers, and you have to correct in a class, which is not possible. You don't have time. Right now, you can delegate that kind of menial work to ChatGPT, but you can monitor how they are using. So that becomes much easier, and there is more collaboration among students, more self-evaluation among students, and that's a very good thing. And I'm still doing it in my classes that I'm teaching at BITS right now, and I would say that it's working fine. Sometimes I ask them to keep the mobile aside and then do it. Sometimes I ask them to take the mobile, use ChatGPT, and come up with something. So that kind of training is necessary, and you can do it explicitly, you can do it implicitly, but if you do that, then ChatGPT doesn't have to be banned in the classroom, and it doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you why in a while. So this is something. She's one of the best researchers in artificial intelligence use in higher education in the world, and I met her recently in um, you know what is called Singapore, uh, National University of Singapore, NUS. Yes, sorry. So I met her there, and she was talking about these things. Banning Gen AI is not an option. Teachers not learning how to use Gen AI as a pedagogic tool is not an option. Institutions not making efforts to improve teachers' AI literacy is not an option. You can find all these details in her book, which is open access, published by Taylor and Francis or Routledge. You can check this out and get this book. It's freely accessible. Just type the title. You will get the book. It's quite useful, and the what she says has meaning, and there's plenty of research to support what she's trying to convey here, and it makes sense. I believe that we need to understand as teachers, we need to improve our AI literacy. We should not ban AI because that's not realistic. That's absolutely unrealistic. Avoiding AI for everything is not a good idea because it's part of our lives. Anything and everything that you do, AI is already part of our lives. So banning it is not an option. Learning how to utilize it properly will help you and will help your students. So probably it's a good idea to learn how to use AI for teaching and learning purposes and productively, not making your students entirely dependent on AI. So my scope for some of the things that I think we can think or for future research could be these are beyond what I have mentioned in the paper because these are maybe still relevant right now if you want to do Gen AI driven feedback across various subject areas. If you have not experimented and you want to work on this, I'm more than happy to collaborate with you. If you want to work with, let's say you're from engineering and science and you want to see how it works in your class for certain purposes, we can do design a study and we can do it. Then Gen AI literacy and its impact on student performance, something that is very interesting, but not much of information is available right now. So we can do that also. This is a very interesting area, but You need to read more on Gen AI literacy and how to obtain information about teachers and students' Gen AI literacy. And then it's used for academic research purposes like PhD supervision. That's one of the kind of most interesting things you can work on right now. I have a PhD student who works on something very close to this topic. And then institutional policy and its or absence of an institutional policy and its impact on students' use of Gen AI. And this kind of impact study also can be done. And this is something that can be done in India more than anywhere else right now in other developing contexts, because we don't have really in many institutions we don't have policies. So we can identify such institutions and see if there is an impact on people's use of Gen AI vis-a-vis where there is a policy and the use of Gen AI in classrooms. If there is policy makes an impact on people's use of Gen AI tools. This is something I got this morning from Professor Rao. He mentioned in his LinkedIn, because I have cited him here. I like this idea that our education, research, and innovation, they're all scattered. They're not coming together. So if AI is there, Gen AI is there, and we can use them, we have not brought them together to talk about to our classrooms. And from classrooms, we have not explored them in our research, and we have not innovated because of that, probably. So probably it's time we bring education, research, and innovation in relation to Gen AI to a classroom context and see how that impacts our students. There's a lot of positive evidence if we learn to innovate properly, learn to innovate in a productive way. Probably we will do good work with Gen AI in the classroom. You could be from any discipline, but this may work. So before I close this, just wanted to mention one more thing is that the paper has been cited by people across, by researchers across different disciplines, starting with physics to engineering to sciences to all kinds of disciplines, because it was published at a time when ChatGPT was just there. It was just released. After that, data were collected, and then I got the study published, one of the earliest ones to do this. Second thing was that it's relevant to a lot of disciplines because people write across disciplines. That's why also people took interest. Third one, it gave classroom based data. So because mostly people use surveys or perception based studies, this was real classroom based data. That's why it got cited more. Um, if you have any questions or queries, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to respond to. Thank you. I'll check. Kartika has a question here. I'm responding to your question. What if the students are not attentive to the feedback? I mean, consciously, but not just use it to just enhance their writing. Um, okay. Once again, okay, I'm reading this. So what if the students are not attentive to the feedback? As a teacher, this is something that you need to monitor, right? Because we are not really giving feedback then and there. You make sure that you monitor and teach them how to use the feedback. And that's why I told you in the training period, you can train them how to create prompts, what to ask, and how to use the feedback in your writing. So you can make sure that they're using it they're paying attention and using it appropriately by asking them to keep the drafts. Okay, so they can keep the first draft and the second draft and show you this is how the first draft is different from second draft, and this was the feedback received, this was done. So if they do that and give you some screenshots, probably you will also know that they are paying attention and they are doing it properly. What type of post-test, pre-test and post-test? You need to have similar kind of items for pre-test and post-test. All three tests, similar difficulty level should be there. Can't be very different, and similar kind of questions also. So yeah, you can do that. Like I did 3 sets, you can also create 3 sets and do this. Harsha is asking me how the tabulated values are calculated, statistical values. You can go to the paper. I think I have mentioned in some detail how I calculated. Um, you know, I used JASP for this to generate the tables and doing the starts. I use JASP, which is a freeware by um, Amsterdam University. So you can download that and use. Quite useful. I like it more than SPSS because this is quite useful, quite intuitive, and generates beautiful, tables. And it has all the statistical thing. I mean, kind of, whatever procedure you want to use, they are available on the platform. So it's wonderful if you can use. Then there is a question by Kartika again. How did you evaluate the students' responses? Rubrics? Yes, I created rubrics and validated the rubrics by um, using it for a few drafts and asking another applied linguist to check the rubrics in terms, and both of us we scored and checked our values in terms of the rubrics. So we changed a few words and phrases, and finally we used a validated set of rubrics. uh, Jyoti is asking, the focus group discussions, were there any outlier perspectives? Yeah, I think the negative things that they talked about, like we felt that probably we are depending more on machines, was a slightly outlier perspective because it was not very frequently observed. It's just mentioned by one or two students, but that was a perspective, and right now it makes a lot of sense, and that happened back then. So. Somebody mentioned that we are becoming more machine dependent. Somebody had this fear. I think that fear was real. I think right now. And then Jyoti is asking, for instance, how did high proficiency students find the tool less helpful than low proficiency students? Were there concerns regarding the loss of personal? See, because academic writing is not really taught in schools, and there is hardly, teachers in schools generally do not have adequate training in teaching academic writing, and not many school textbooks are like workbooks where you have appropriate tasks and activities that can be used in the classroom. So this is in the classroom, generally they ask, write a paragraph on this and write this, and then teacher checks and gives you a score, right, wrong, here and there. That's not how you teach academic writing. So people generally don't, it's a problem in India and a problem elsewhere also, that because of lack of training that happens. So if you use appropriate tasks and all, probably they will do well. So that's why the students that came in, though they were fluent in English, but their academic writing was not really in great shape. So my teaching was relevant, and it suddenly kind of it worked in the classroom. It was, uh, it kind of, I thought it was relevant. So, yeah, so that's the answer to your question. We'll wait for a minute. If there is no more question, then we will stop there. Thank you, Jyoti, and thank you, Kartika. I think that's it then. Thank you. Shall we close?